When the crime lord saw the girl collapsed at the base of his front steps, he didn't move a muscle. She was barefoot, her body visibly shaking, every inch of exposed skin punished by the freezing night air. His men were already closing in, ready to remove her like she was nothing more than a piece of unwanted furniture left on the wrong doorstep. But just before their hands could reach her, the girl slowly raised her head, one eye swollen completely shut, blood drying on her lip, and whispered three words that stopped everything cold. "My father, my brother." In that moment, Ronan Vael understood two things simultaneously. She wasn't lying. And whoever had left her in this condition had just made the most catastrophic mistake of their lives, because they had used his name to sell her. The cold that December was the kind that didn't ask permission. It moved through the city like something alive, wrapping itself around steel towers, pressing into doorways, turning every exhaled breath into a ghost. Even the wealthy walked fast that night, heads down, collars up, anxious to be anywhere but outside. Ronan Vael was not walking fast. He stood on the stone steps of the Crestfield building at 11:14 in the evening, adjusting a cufflink with the kind of unhurried precision that made the three men flanking him instinctively hold their breath. The meeting inside had gone exactly as planned. A Port Authority contract routed through a chain of shell companies so clean they could survive a federal audit. 2 years of careful work, not a single traceable fingerprint. He didn't smile. Ronan never smiled when things went well. He saved that expression for when they went badly, for the men who sat across from him afterward and slowly realized the depth of what they had gotten wrong. He was reaching for his coat button when the girl materialized from the shadows. She didn't walk into the light. She appeared the way wounded animals do, already too close before you sense them, moving between two parked cars on his left with bare feet on frozen pavement. Her feet were a color that had no business belonging to a living body. She wore what had once been a white dress, now torn at the shoulder, the hem darkened with something rust-colored. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles across a face that told the whole story before she opened her mouth. A left eye swollen nearly shut, a split lip, a bruise along her jawline still deepening, still deciding what shape it would take. Her wrists, both of them, carried the kind of marks that come from hands, not rope. Someone who knew her had held her down. Dex, the closest of Ronan's men, was already moving, hands shifting inside his jacket, body angling to cut her off. But she didn't lunge. She didn't reach for anything. She stopped 3 feet from the bottom step, and then her legs simply gave out beneath her. She dropped like a structure failing from the inside. No scream, no performance, just quiet collapse. Her palms hit the concrete. Her head fell forward. And then, barely louder than the wind, "My father and my brother did this." She wasn't asking for rescue. That was the detail that arrested Ronan's hand mid-gesture, the hand that had been about to wave Dex forward to remove her. She wasn't performing distress. She wasn't begging. She was confessing, the way someone confesses something so deeply shameful they can barely get the words to leave their body. She said it like it was her fault. Dex looked back, waiting for the signal. Ronan studied her for 4 seconds. In his world, 4 seconds was an eternity. 4 seconds was enough to read a room, measure a threat, and decide what kind of night this was going to become. He noted her hands, no weapon, no phone, no jewelry. The nails on her right hand were snapped back in a way that meant she had clawed at something, a door maybe, or someone's face. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. The breathing of someone who has been running for a very long time and has finally stopped. Not because they are safe, but because the body simply refused to carry them any further. Dex, one word, barely a sound. Dex took a step back. Ronan descended 3 steps. He didn't crouch. He didn't reach for her. He stopped at a distance close enough to hear her, far enough that she wouldn't flinch. The distance of a man who understood that proximity in this moment was not the point. "Look at me," he said, not a command, not quite a request. Something precisely between the two. She lifted her head, one eye swollen shut. The other wide open, dark and completely clear. That single detail changed everything. That eye held no hysteria, no manipulation, no reckless desperation. It held calculation. She had chosen to come here. She had chosen him. This wasn't random. This was a decision made by someone who had examined every available option and selected the most dangerous one with full awareness of what it could cost her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mara?" A pause, as if the surname carried physical weight. "Kane." The name landed quietly, but Dex shifted his weight. The other two men exchanged a glance that lasted less than a second, which in their world amounted to a full conversation. Ronan knew the name. Anyone who operated in certain circles knew it. Edmund. Kane was a mid-level operator who ran credit fraud and moved stolen cargo through a network of dockyard warehouses. Not powerful enough to sit at any table that mattered. Not reckless enough to get himself caught. The kind of man who survived by being useful to people with more reach and invisible to people with more danger. His son Cole was a different problem. The kind of young man who confused cruelty with authority and volume with power. Ronan had crossed paths with him once, briefly, at a gathering he had no business attending. He had watched Cole drink too much, laugh too loudly, and press his hand against a server's arm in a way that made her face go absolutely still. Ronan had filed the observation away the way he filed everything. Precisely, patiently, for later. "You need a hospital," Ronan said. "No," the word came fast and hard. "They will find me there. They are already looking." "Who is looking?" "My father, my brother." Her clear eye flickered. Something moved behind it, not fear exactly, but the recognition that what she was about to say would push her past a point of no return. "And a man named Victor Hain." Now the temperature shifted. Victor Hain was not a name spoken casually. Hain ran narcotics, debt collection, and what he euphemistically called human logistics, services rendered for people who needed problems to quietly disappear, not the financial kind. The breathing kind. He wasn't powerful the way Ronan was powerful. He was powerful the way Rod is powerful. Patient, pervasive, and perfectly willing to destroy whatever it had attached itself to. "Tell me," Ronan said, "what Victor Hain has to do with you." Mara's jaw tightened. The split in her lip reopened. A thin thread of blood traced down her chin, and she didn't wipe it. "My father owed him money, a lot of money. More than he could ever repay." She steadied her breathing. "So he offered something else?" "She didn't say me, she didn't have to." "The arrangement was made 3 weeks ago," she continued, her voice flat now, clinical, as if she were reading a report about someone else's life. "I wasn't told, I wasn't consulted. I came home tonight and my bags were packed. Cole was in the living room with 2 men I had never seen. My father told me it was settled, that I should be grateful because Hain had agreed to forgive the entire debt." She stopped. Not because she couldn't finish, because finishing it made it real in a way that her beaten, freezing body somehow still hadn't. In exchange for me, silence. The city breathed around them, traffic, distant sirens. The indifferent mechanical hum of a place that didn't care. Ronan's face didn't move. "I refused," Mara said. "My brother hit me. When I tried to leave, my father locked the door. Cole," her voice cracked, "just once. She rebuilt it immediately. Cole held me down while they called Hain to come collect me, but I got out through the bathroom window, 2nd floor. I landed badly. I think my wrist." She glanced at her left hand as if seeing it for the first time. It was swollen, angled slightly wrong. She looked back at him. "I didn't know where to go, so you came here." "I came here because of what they said." Her eye locked onto his without wavering. "When my father was convincing me this was over, that I couldn't fight it, he used your name. He said the arrangement had been brokered under the Vael guarantee. He said Victor Hain was operating with your blessing. He said if I ran, I wouldn't just be defying him. I would be defying you." The silence that followed was a living thing. Dex took half a step forward. Ronan raised one finger. Dex turned to stone. "He used my name," Ronan said. "Not a question. Yes, your name, to sell his daughter." Ronan Vael had been angry before. Angry in ways that had quietly restructured the power balance of entire neighborhoods. Angry in ways that had collapsed empires and erased bloodlines. But his anger was never heat. It was never noise. It was a dropping of temperature so severe that the men closest to him could feel it move down their spines like a cold hand. Dex felt it now. He took a full step back. "Dex," Ronan's voice was almost gentle. "Sir, bring the car. Have Sarah prepare the East Room. Call Dr. Merrow, not the hospital, the private line." And pull me the full background file on Edmund Kane and Victor Hain. Everything, sir, everything. And Dex, he paused. No one speaks of this tonight, not until I decide what this becomes. Dex was gone before the sentence finished. Ronan removed his coat. Doc, cashmere, charcoal gray, worth more than most people's monthly income. He didn't drape it over her shoulders. That would require a closeness she hadn't invited. He placed it on the bottom step, within her reach. You can take it or leave it, he said. But your body temperature is falling, and I would prefer you didn't die on my steps before I have had the chance to address what your father has done with my name. She looked at the coat, then at him, then she took it. The east room of Ronan Vael's residence occupied the upper floor of a brownstone on a street with no signage. From the outside, it looked like a private architectural firm. Clean stone, recessed lighting. Nothing to suggest that the man who slept 3 floors above controlled enough financial infrastructure to quietly destabilize a mid-sized bank. Mara sat on the edge of a bed she hadn't asked for. In a room larger than her entire apartment, Dr. Merrow, a silver-haired woman with steady hands and no unnecessary questions, had set the wrist in a splint, cleaned the cuts, and applied something cold and chemical to the bruising. She had offered painkillers Mara had declined. The adrenaline will wear off in about 40 minutes, Dr. Merrow had said. You will want them by then. I need to be clear when I talk. And that had been the end of it. Now she sat in borrowed clothes, a dark sweater, cotton trousers, thick socks, brought by a tall, unreadable woman named Sira, who moved through the house like weather. The clothes fit imperfectly, which meant they hadn't been bought for her. They had been pulled quickly from whatever was available. That detail mattered to Mara. It meant she was unexpected. It meant this wasn't scripted, a knock at the door. A real one, followed by silence and waiting. Come in, Ronan entered alone. No guards. He carried a cup of something hot and set it beside the bed. Not beside her, beside the bed, and then moved to a chair across the room and sat. Dr. Merrow says your wrist is fractured, not broken, he said. The rest is surface damage. She will return tomorrow, if you are still here, if not when. The conditional was deliberate. He was telling her the door wasn't locked. I will be here, Mara said. I have nowhere else to go. That is not the reason. She looked at him. Then what is? Because you need to tell me everything. Not the version you gave me on the steps. The version you have been editing in your head for the last hour, deciding what is safe to include and what to hold back. I need the complete picture. Every name, every date, every document you know of, and exactly how Victor Hain was told my name was attached to this arrangement. She was quiet for a moment. You are not angry that I came to you, she said. You are angry that they used you. I am angry, Ronan said. And the word in his mouth sounded like a vault door closing. That a man I have never authorized to speak on my behalf attached my name to the sale of his own daughter. Yes. That requires my attention. And what about the part that requires my attention? Mara asked. Her voice was level. She held his gaze with her one working eye, and there was something in it now. Not defiance exactly, but a refusal to be a footnote in her own story. I didn't come here to help you settle a business dispute. I came here because I have no safe ground in this city. Because the man they sold me to will come looking. Because my father and my brother will tell Hain I ran, and Hain doesn't accept that. He doesn't accept loss. No, Ronan agreed, he doesn't. So what happens to me? Ronan studied her. She didn't look away. What happens to you, he said, is what you decide happens to you. I am not in the business of collecting people. You are not a debt, an asset, or an obligation. You are someone who arrived at my door with information I need, and I will give you safety while I use it. After that, you will have options, real ones. That is what I can offer. Why? Because someone used my name to do something I find repulsive. And the most effective way to dismantle what they have built is to keep you alive, visible, and free. Your existence as a free woman is the first piece of evidence that their arrangement means nothing. It was not a tender answer. It wasn't romantic or heroic. It was strategic, transactional, and completely honest. Mara picked up the cup. Tea. She drank. Okay, she said. Then I will tell you everything. The full picture, as Ronan had called it, was worse than he had anticipated. Over the next 2 hours, Mara laid it out with a precision that surprised even Dex, who listened from the doorway. She wasn't emotional. She was organized. She had dates, figures, names. She had absorbed conversations her father hadn't known she had overheard. She had screenshots on a phone she no longer possessed, but she could recall the contents almost word for word. Edmund Kane owed Victor Hain $420,000. The debt had originated from a cargo scheme that collapsed. Edmund had been moving stolen electronics through Hain's distribution network when a shipment was intercepted. Hain held Edmund personally liable. The repayment terms were impossible by design. Hain hadn't wanted money, he had wanted leverage. The arrangement was ancient, simple, and monstrous. Mara, in exchange for the full debt forgiveness plus Edmund's ongoing cooperation with Hain's dockyard network. A transaction dressed in the language of obligation, structured as a purchase. And to make Mara believe resistance was pointless, to make her feel that fighting back was not just futile but dangerous. Edmund had told both Hain and his daughter that the deal carried Ronan Vael's personal endorsement, that Ronan was aware, that Ronan had approved, that defying the arrangement meant defying someone who simply could not be defied. It was a lie. But it was a lie built on a truth that made it devastating. Ronan Vael's name in the right rooms was worth more than cash, more than muscle. It was a currency of fear so refined that invoking it could end a conversation before it started. Edmund Kane had counterfeited that currency. And now it was circulating. He knew you would never personally verify it, Mara said. You are not someone Hain would call to confirm. You are someone Hain would believe on reputation alone. Ronan said nothing for a long time. He sat in the same chair, one ankle resting on the other knee, hands folded, face in absolute closed system. Dex, he said finally, Sir, I need 3 things by morning. First, confirmation of the debt between Kane and Hain, every trail it left, paper and digital. Second, every asset Edmund Kane controls, declared and undeclared, properties, accounts, vehicles, warehouse leases. Third, the name and contact information of every journalist, prosecutor, and regulatory official who has shown documented interest in Victor Hain's operations. A pause. All 3, sir. All 3. By morning, Dex left. Mara watched Ronan. He hadn't moved. His breathing hadn't changed. His voice had remained at the same measured pitch through the entire conversation, the same unhurried cadence, the same controlled temperature. Most people performed their anger. Ronan Vael simply organized his. You are going to do something, she said. Not a question. Yes, something violent? He looked at her. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not a softening exactly, but a recalibration, as if adjusting the lens through which he was seeing her. No, he said, something worse. If you are watching this on SIF Stories, don't go anywhere. The most important part is still coming. 3 days passed. During those 3 days, Mara lived in a kind of suspended gravity. The East Room became her entire world. 4 walls, a window overlooking a quiet interior courtyard, a bathroom with a lock she tested every night, and a silence that wasn't oppressive. It was deliberate. No one entered without knocking. No one lingered without reason. Sierra brought meals and clean clothes and a phone with exactly 1 number programmed into it and asked nothing. Mara didn't need company, she needed time. Time to let the bruises reach their deepest color before they began to fade. Time to test the edges of a place that claimed to have no edges. Time to sit with the strange, impossible fact that she was inside the home of one of the most dangerous men in the city and feeling for the first time in years something that lived in the neighborhood of safe. She didn't trust it, she tested it. On the second night, she walked to the front door. It was unlocked. She opened it. Cold air poured in. She stood there for 2 full minutes staring at the empty street, and no one appeared. No guard, no alarm. No hand on her shoulder. She closed the door and went back upstairs. On the 3rd morning, she came down to find Ronan in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter reading a tablet, drinking coffee from a plain white mug, wearing a dark sweater and no shoes. It was the most human she had ever seen him look. Good morning, good morning. Neither of them knew what came next. They weren't friends. They weren't adversaries. They were 2 people bound by a circumstance that had no name and hadn't existed 5 days ago. Mara sat at the counter, not close, not far, a kind of negotiated distance, and poured herself coffee from the pot. For 3 minutes, they existed in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable. Just uncharted. "I have something to show you," Ronan said. He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a legal document dense with formal language with a summary sheet attached. Mara read it once, then read it again. "This is a fraud complaint," she said. "Filed this morning with the State Attorney General's office. It names your father, your brother, and Victor Hain as co-conspirators in a scheme involving identity fraud, coercive contract enforcement, and the unauthorized use of a protected business entity's name mine to facilitate what is classifiable under federal statute as human trafficking." Mara stared at the document. Her uninjured hand had begun to tremble. "Not from fear, you went to the authorities." "I went to a prosecutor named Aldous Varn, who has been building a case against Hain's network for nearly 2 years and was missing exactly the kind of first-hand testimony you can provide. I also went to a federal judge who issued emergency restraining orders against your father and brother within the hour. And I contacted a financial oversight board that has been waiting for grounds to audit every account Hain has touched in the last 18 months. He said this the way other people describe the weather, but that is not the part I wanted to show you." He swiped the screen. A new document appeared. An embargoed press release, dated for the following morning. It was a feature article by an investigative journalist at a major metropolitan paper. It detailed how Edmund Cain and his son Cole had attempted to broker the sale of Edmund's own daughter to a known criminal figure in exchange for debt forgiveness. It named names, it cited sources. It included financial records that Mara recognized immediately, records that could only have come from the safe behind the panel in her father's office. Records she had mentioned offhandedly during her account 3 nights earlier. "How did you get these?" she whispered. "Your father's safe was not difficult to access," Ronan said. "His security is aspirational," she looked up. "This will destroy them, yes, not just legally. Their reputation, their network, everyone who has ever done business with them will distance themselves overnight," he agreed. "And Hain," his voice dropped half a register, "is about to discover that every asset he controls in this city has been frozen by federal order. His 3 primary accounts were flagged this morning. His warehouse leases are under review. His legal counsel has been informed through intermediary channels that continued representation of Mr. Hain may attract the attention of the Bar Association's Ethics Committee." He paused. "I didn't touch him. I didn't threaten him. I didn't send anyone to his door. I simply made the world around him inhospitable." Mara set the tablet down. Her hand was still shaking. She pressed it flat against the countertop. "Why, this way?" she asked. And this time she didn't mean, "Why are you doing this?" She meant something larger, something that didn't have a clean question to contain it. "Why not the faster way? You have the means. Why use the law when you could use something else?" Ronan understood exactly what she was asking. "Because if I move against them violently," he said, "they become victims. Their story changes. The narrative shifts from what they did to what was done to them. They earn sympathy they have no right to. And the people who allowed this, the people who knew and said nothing, get to stay invisible forever." He drank his coffee. "But if I expose them, if I let the very system they believed they were above crush them under its own weight, then the story stays exactly where it belongs. On them, on what they chose to do. On the daughter they tried to sell and the name they stole to do it." He looked at her. "Violence ends a story. Exposure is the story." The article ran the following morning. It detonated across every platform that mattered and several that didn't. The headline was almost restrained, which somehow made it worse. The details were left to speak for themselves, and they spoke at full volume. By noon, Edmund Cain's warehouse leases had been revoked. His business associates issued statements of disassociation so hastily composed they contained spelling errors. His phone, once a direct line to a network of mid-level operators and fixers across the city, now connected him to silence. No one answered. No one called back. In the span of 12 hours, Edmund Cain went from being a man with debts and connections to a man with debts and nothing else. Cole fared worse. Cole, who had always mistaken his father's borrowed connections for his own power, discovered that borrowed power can be repossessed without warning. A video surfaced, not released by Ronan, but found by the journalist's research team, showing Cole at a private gathering, drunk, laughing, describing the arrangement in terms so callous that even the most cynical corners of the internet recoiled. The footage spread everywhere. Cole Kane became a name people recognized the way they recognized the name of a disease. And Victor Hain, who had survived federal investigations, rival operations, and 3 separate attempts on his life, found himself facing something he had no protocol for: irrelevance. His accounts frozen, his legal team evaporating, his name attached to the word trafficking in a federal complaint. The people who had done business with Hain began doing what people in that world always do when the water starts rising. They swam. 4 days after the article ran, Mara's phone rang. She answered. Her father's voice filled the line. "Mara, listen to me. You have to come home. You have to fix this." "Tell them you lied?" She ended the call. Her hand was completely steady. 2 weeks passed. Mara was still in the East Room. The fracture in her wrist was healing. The bruises had faded to a watercolor yellow-green that she studied in the mirror each morning, watching the evidence of what had been done to her slowly, methodically absorbed back into her skin. She and Ronan had developed a rhythm that neither of them had planned. Mornings, she came downstairs. He was in the kitchen or the study or somewhere on the phone in a language she didn't recognize. They exchanged quiet greetings. Sometimes she sat in the same room while he worked, reading from the collection of books in his study, law texts alongside literature, nothing predictable. He never asked what she was reading. She never asked what he was working on. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of things neither of them had yet decided to say. One evening she found him on the second-floor landing, looking out at the courtyard below. Snow was falling, thick and slow, the kind that muffles a city into something almost gentle. She stood beside him. "Not close, the negotiated distance. Can I ask you something?" "You have been asking me things for 2 weeks, but this one is different." He waited, that night on the steps. "You could have had Dex move me along. You could have ignored me completely, given me cab fare and a phone number and gone inside. Why didn't you?" Ronan was quiet. The snow kept falling. "Because you looked at me with one eye," he said, "and I could see that you had made a decision. Not a plea, a decision. You had calculated your options, identified the most dangerous one, and chosen it with complete awareness of what it might cost you. That is not the behavior of someone who needs saving." He turned from the window. "That is the behavior of someone who has already saved themselves and is simply looking for ground to stand on. I have ground." "I thought I could offer some of it." She didn't respond right away. She looked at the snow, at his reflection in the glass, at the distance between them, a distance he had never once attempted to close. "You have never touched me," she said. 2 weeks. "You have never stood closer than this." "No. Why?" "Because your body has been treated as something that belongs to other people for long enough." A pause. "I will not be another man who decides what happens to it." Something broke open quietly in Mara's chest, not dramatically. She didn't cry, didn't gasp. It was quieter than that, a seam giving way, a wall discovering it was exhausted. She reached across the negotiated distance and placed her hand on his forearm. Her fingers rested there for 3 seconds. Then she withdrew. "Thank you," she said. He looked at the place where her hand had been. "You're welcome," he said, and that was all. For now, that was enough. The confrontation with Edmund Kane happened on a Tuesday. Not for any dramatic reason, simply because Ronan Vael did not believe in dramatic timing. He believed in preparation, and preparation was complete on Tuesday. The meeting took place in a room above a restaurant in the garment district. Technically neutral ground, though nothing was truly neutral when Ronan occupied it. The room was plain. A wooden table, 4 chairs, curtained windows. Dex stood at the door. Ronan's attorney, a precise woman named Lena Drast, sat at the table with a leather portfolio in front of her, wearing her silence like a sharpened instrument. Edmund Kane arrived looking like a man who had been living inside a collapsing building for 2 weeks. His suit was expensive and deeply wrinkled. His face was gaunt. His eyes moved restlessly, to the door, to Dex, to Lena, and finally, reluctantly, to Ronan. Cole was not present. Ronan had not invited him. Cole was irrelevant. Sit, Ronan said. Edmund sat. Let me describe your situation so we are both working from the same information, Ronan began. Your warehouse network has been seized as part of a federal investigation. Your personal accounts are flagged for audit. Your son is facing criminal charges his current legal representation cannot adequately handle. Your business associates have, without exception, severed contact. And Victor Hain, the man you attempted to appease by selling your daughter, is himself now facing an indictment that your cooperation helped build. Which means that if Hain survives this, the first person he will blame is you. Edmund's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You are, in the most precise sense of the word, alone, Ronan continued. And you are alone because you did something remarkably stupid. You used the name of someone who does not forgive stupidity. I didn't, Edmund started. Don't. One word. Edmund stopped. You told your daughter that I had endorsed this arrangement. You told Victor Hain that I had guaranteed it. You took my name, a name I have spent years building and enforcing, and attached it to the sale of a 23-year-old woman to a man who traffics narcotics and people. You did this without my knowledge, without my consent, and without even the basic intelligence to consider that she might run. That she might run to me. Ronan leaned forward. I want you to understand something, Edmund. What I have done to you so far, the legal filings, the press exposure, the financial dismantling, that is not punishment. That is correction. I am correcting the record. I am establishing publicly and permanently that my name was misused, and that misuse carries consequences. He paused. Punishment would require me to be emotional. I am not emotional. I am thorough. Lena Drast opened the portfolio and placed a single document on the table. That is a signed affidavit, Ronan said. You will review it with whatever counsel you can still retain, and you will sign it within 72 hours. In it, you will confirm that the arrangement with Victor Hain was made without my knowledge or consent. You will confirm that you used my name fraudulently. You will confirm the full terms of that arrangement, including your daughter's role in it. And you will relinquish all parental claim, financial or otherwise, over Mara Kane. Edmund stared at the document. If you sign, the remainder of your life proceeds through legal channels. If you don't, I will dismantle what remains of your life using means that are entirely legal, entirely public, and entirely permanent. His voice didn't change pitch. It didn't accelerate, and I will do it on a Tuesday. Because that is when my schedule allows. Edmund Kane looked at the man across the table and saw what everyone eventually saw. The thing that made Ronan Vael not just powerful, but different from the men who came before him. There was no rage here. No vendetta, no personal investment. Only a vast, intricate patient system being applied to a problem. Edmund picked up the pen. The night her father signed, Mara sat alone in the East Room and cried, not from sadness. Not from relief? Because the thing she had been holding together, the rigid architecture of herself, the discipline of survival, the absolute refusal to break, was no longer needed. The emergency was over. And when the emergency ends, the body does what it has been waiting to do. She cried for 40 minutes. Then she washed her face, drank a glass of water, and went downstairs. Ronan was in the study. The door was open. He was writing something by hand, actual pen on paper, which she had noticed he only did when something mattered enough to slow down for. She stood in the doorway. It's done. Yes, what happens now? He set the pen down. Now you decide. Lena has prepared several options. There is a relocation fund, untraceable, no conditions. There is a contact who specializes in identity protection for people in vulnerable situations. There is a standing offer of testimony coordination with the federal prosecutor, which carries additional legal protection. And there is time as much as you need, and if I want to stay? The question sat in the room like a held breath. Then you stay, Ronan said. The East Room isn't needed for anything else. That is not what I am asking. He knew that. She knew he knew. The silence between them had been building for 2 weeks. Not the silence of avoidance, but of recognition. Two people who had both been watching, both been careful, both waiting for the moment when the crisis receded far enough to reveal what was underneath it. I know what you are asking, Ronan said. And I will not answer it tonight. Why? Because tonight you are processing something enormous. Anything I say will be filtered through that. I want you to hear me clearly, so I will wait. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I will wait too. She turned and walked toward the stairs. At the landing she paused. Ronan, yes, the way you wrote my name in that document. Mara Kane, you wrote it like it meant something. It does. She went upstairs. He picked up the pen. The snow continued to fall. Spring came the way it does in cities that have endured hard winters. Not all at once, but in small surrenders. Ice loosening its grip on iron railings, light lasting a few more minutes each evening. The faint smell of something growing beneath the concrete. The case against Victor Hayne moved forward with the quiet inevitability of gravity. Mara testified twice, once in a closed deposition, once before a grand jury. Both times she spoke with the same clinical precision she had used on that first night on the steps. Both times. The room fell into a silence that had nothing to do with courtroom procedure and everything to do with the weight of what she described. Edmund cooperated, not out of conscience. Out of arithmetic? The deal Lena had structured offered reduced charges in exchange for full disclosure, and Edmund, who had always been a man of calculation, calculated that survival was worth more than dignity. Cole refused to cooperate and was charged accordingly. His trial was set for autumn. Hayne's empire didn't collapse. It evaporated. Without access to his accounts, his network withered. Without legal cover, his operations became visible. Without the myth of invulnerability that had protected him for years, he became what he had always been underneath. A man who had built power on fear, and whose fear had finally been redirected back at him. He was arrested on a Wednesday. Mara watched the footage on the evening news. She didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter. Something that lived in the same neighborhood as the end of a long illness. She stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go. She did now. The relocation fund was real. The identity protection was in place. She had options that hadn't existed 3 months earlier, options she had built herself with her own testimony. Her own precision, her own refusal to be erased. She stayed because of what happened on a Sunday in April. It was morning. Mara was in the courtyard, sitting on a bench with a book open in her lap, her face tilted toward the first real warmth the year had managed. She heard the door. Ronan came outside. He stood for a moment, then sat down on the bench. Not at the negotiated distance, closer, still not touching, but closer than he had ever chosen to be. I have something to tell you, he said. She closed the book. My mother, he said, was a woman who married a man she believed was powerful. She discovered after the wedding that his power was the kind that requires victims. She stayed for 11 years. She protected me for 11 years. And then she left. Not because she had stopped being afraid, but because she decided her fear was less important than my future. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the courtyard wall, at the light moving across it. She died when I was 19. The doctors said it was a genetic heart condition. I have always believed it was cumulative. That fear, held inside long enough, becomes a physical event. He paused. I tell you this because I want you to understand why I stopped that night when you lifted your head on that sidewalk. I wasn't responding to your situation. I was responding to you, the decision you had made, the cost you were willing to pay, the fact that you didn't ask me to save you. You asked me to witness what had been done to you. And to someone who grew up watching a woman refuse to be invisible, that is not a small thing. Now he looked at her. I have been many things in my life, Mara. Some of them I am not proud of. But I've never been a man who looks away from someone who refuses to disappear. That isn't a virtue. It is simply who I am. Mara sat with this for a moment. The courtyard was still. The sunlight moved the way sunlight does, slowly, indifferently, illuminating whatever it touched without preference or judgment. I'm going to say something, she said, and I need you to hear it without turning it into a strategy. I will try. The night I came to your steps, you were a calculation. The most dangerous option that might also be the safest. The next morning in the kitchen, you were a system. Efficient, controlled, impersonal. But here, right now, on this bench, she stopped, started again. You are a man who just told me about his mother. And I think that is the bravest thing you have done since I have known you, braver than the legal filings. Braver than the meeting with my father. Because this you cannot control. Something moved across Ronan's face, not a smile. Not a crack, something tectonic, deep, slow, and irreversible. No, he said quietly, I can't. She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her. They sat in the first real sunlight of spring, and the distance between them was no longer negotiated, it was chosen. And it was smaller than it had ever been. This is not the end. Victor Hayne awaits trial. But trials can be delayed, and delay is the territory of the desperate. Edmund Kane cooperates, but cooperation born of self-preservation is not the same as change, and Edmund Kane has never changed in his life. Cole Kane sits in a holding facility, nursing a fury that has nowhere to go, constructing a story in which he is the wronged party, waiting for someone foolish enough to believe it. The world that produced this story is still turning. The machinery of debt, coercion, and inherited violence does not pause because one woman escaped and one man chose not to look away. There will be more nights, more decisions. More moments where the line between power and restraint is so thin that only the person standing on it can see it clearly. Mara Kane is 23 years old. She has a wrist that healed slightly crooked and a scar along her jawline that will fade but never fully disappear. She has a room in a brownstone on a street with no sign. Ronan Vael is 32 years old. He controls enough infrastructure to quietly reshape the financial landscape of a city, and he chose to use it not to destroy men, but to expose them. He sleeps 3 floors above a woman he has never touched, and may not touch for a long time yet, and the distance between them is not the failure of desire. It is the deliberate exercise of the only kind of power that truly matters, the kind that gives power back. There is a question at the center of this story, and it isn't what happened. What happened is on the record in affidavits and press releases and frozen accounts and courtroom testimony. The question is, what kind of person do you become when you have the power to do anything? Do you take? Do you punish? Do you own? Or do you stand at a chosen distance in sunlight you didn't create and wait, patiently, deliberately, for as long as it takes, for the moment when she decides, on her own terms, to close the gap? The snow is gone, the city is waking up, and this story, like all stories that matter, is not finished, it is beginning. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and if you haven't already, subscribe to SIF Stories. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you.